In the history of humanity, there are many wars and struggles that have determined the destinies of nations. In this part of Matt's story, we will talk about the fall of Constantinople. A city is known as the Queen of Cities. One of the most powerful empires known in history. An empire that gathered countless nations under its banner, the Ottoman Empire. The empire, founded in 1299, set its sights on Rumelian lands after securing Anatolian lands. The biggest obstacle between it and the Rumelian campaign was Constantinople. The city was the capital of the Byzantine Empire, as well as the greatest heir of Eastern Rome. The city was besieged by the Ottomans many times, but never conquered. The biggest supporter of the successful Byzantine defense was the Christian world. In 1451, when he was only 19 years old, Mehmed II became the new owner of the throne. The greatest aim of the young sultan was to throw the Byzantine Empire from these lands forever. For this, the conquest of Constantinople was essential. Mehmed ordered that a fortress be built on Rumelian lands without wasting any time. Thus, Constantinople's sea connection would be largely cut off. The fortress was built opposite the Anatolian fortress and was called the Rumelian Fortress. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire made many attempts to prevent the construction of the fortress. However, the fortress was finished in a very short time thanks to the determined steps of Mehmed. This was not the only project carried out before the siege. Mehmed knew that Byzants could stand behind the mighty walls of Constantinople for months. In the past, their ancestors tried to breach these walls many times, but they all failed. Therefore, he gave the order to begin the construction of large cannons to demolish the city walls. These cannons are called the basilic. They were huge and very powerful, unlike the cannons of the period. With their 550-kilogram cannonball, 8 meters in length, and 2.5 meters in circumference, these cannons would bury the Byzantine Empire in the dusty pages of history. This was the greatest indicator of firepower that had never been seen before. Other preparations made before the siege were the strengthening of the Ottoman navy and the capture of the surrounding forts and towns. During the Ottoman siege preparations, the Byzantine Empire was struggling with sectarian internal turmoil. The Byzantine people took a stand against the Catholic Church, due to show their reactions to the unification in 1439 of the Catholic and Orthodox churches. These sectarian problems caused the disruption of aid from Europe to Byzantium. While the Byzantine Empire was waiting for the day of the siege, 3 galleys, 200 soldiers, and ammunition were sailed to the sea by the papacy to support Byzantium. Also, in January 1453, under the leadership of the Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani, 700 soldiers with 2 ships came to the aid of Byzantium. The Emperor of Byzantine, Constantine, who desperately needed this support, declared Giustiniani the commander-in-chief of the city's defense. On the morning of April 6, 1453, the Ottoman army was deployed from the Golden Horn to the Marmara. On the same day, Constantine and his forces deployed to Adrianopolis Gate. The Byzantine defense plan was as follows. St. Romano's Gate is held by Giustiniani and his men. Between St. Romano's and Adrianopolis is guarded by Byzantine and Genoese troops. And finally, Byzantine and Venetian forces were in the defense between St. Romano's and the Salimbria Gate in the south. On the other hand, the regions where the Ottoman army was positioned for the siege, Zaganos Pasha and his forces on the Galata front, Anatolian Grand Sania, Isaac Pasha and his troops in the southern part of the walls, Rumelian Grand Sania, Karacha Pasha and his soldiers were located in the north. Mehmed and his Janissaries were stationed on the central front, between the gates of St. Romanos and Adrianopolis. This area was the weakest point of the Byzantine walls. Therefore, the largest cannons were placed on this front. After a while, all cannons were deployed. Mehmed sent an envoy to the city and offered them to surrender. Constantine had sworn to protect the city. However, they stated that they could pay taxes if requested. Mehmed was not interested in anything other than the conquest of the city. Therefore, he refused this offer and ordered the artillery to begin. The city was pelted with cannons for 12 days, until April the 18th. On the night of April the 18th, a breach was opened in the first and second walls of the city on the central front. Without wasting any time, Mehmed ordered his soldiers to attack the breach with siege towers. However, the desired result could not be achieved. The Ottoman siege towers were burned by Grijuva, known as Greek fire. Thus, Ottoman soldiers had to retreat. Unlike the normal fire, Grijuva was a fire that burned more as the water was poured on it. It contains pitch, resin, sulfur, naphtha, and saltpeter. It was developed by a Syrian immigrant, Kallinikos, in the 7th century. Ottoman siege towers did not have much of a chance against this fire. At sea, the first defeat for the Ottoman Empire was on April the 15th. The Ottoman navy forces couldn't breach the chain that cut the Golden Horn. This chain was pulled between the Castilian and Eugenia's towers on April the 2nd. The purpose was to stop the advance of a possible Ottoman navy by closing the Golden Horn. The rings that make up the chain were not all the same. The Byzantine navy had secured themselves behind the chain, formed by rings, with thicknesses ranging from 2 centimeters to 6 centimeters. When the date showed April the 20th, there was news that lowered the morale of the soldiers of the Ottoman Empire. The support forces, consisting of 3 Genoese galleons sent by the papacy and 1 Byzantine warship, approached Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed sent Suleiman Bey with his 18 ships to attack the support fleet. In the beginning, Genoese galleons widened the distance thanks to the wind behind them. However, the galleons remained motionless in the middle of the sea when the wind stopped. With the arrival of the remaining galleys, the Ottoman navy became a force of 150 ships and surrounded the Genoese galleons. However, the galleons were higher and powerful than the Ottoman galleys. Therefore, a successful result could not be achieved. The Ottoman navy had to retreat due to heavy losses. Remaining 2 Genoese galleons continued on their way, and when the chains of the Golden Horn were loosened, when the dark came, 2 Genoese galleons were able to reach Constantinople for help. As a result of the failures at sea and on land, Sultan Mehmed held a meeting with his commanders. At the meeting, it was suggested that Byzantium be taxed with 70,000 ducats of gold. However, Mehmed had long since rejected this offer. His sole aim was to capture Constantinople. However, the biggest obstacle between him and the city was not only the walls, but also the chain that protected the Golden Horn. Finally, they began to evaluate an idea that was dreamy but believed they could do. It was decided to carry the ships by land. After Mehmed gave the order for this difficult operation, 72 Ottoman warships were transferred to the other side of the chain on the night of the 21st to 22nd of April. The Byzantium was not aware of this operation, because they were dealing with the repair of a great breach in St. Romano's Gate. Also, the Byzantine navy in the Golden Horn was under intense artillery fire. On April the 24th, one of Justinian's galleys tried to ambush the Ottoman fleet that had landed in the Golden Horn. However, it was sunk by the Ottoman artillery forces. In the following days, the Byzantine navy and support forces suffered great losses. The biggest reason for these losses was that the Genoese provided intelligence to the Ottoman Empire. The Genoese played both sides during the war. They were providing intelligence to both the Ottomans and Byzantium. In this way, at the end of the war, they would be on the winning side of any kind. While the struggle with artillery continues in the Golden Horn, there was incessant fighting at the St. Romano's Gate. On the evening of May the 6th, Sultan Mehmed launched an offensive. However, this attack did not yield any positive results. With the arrival of Venetian sailors, the struggle in St. Romano's Gate was dragged to a dead end. After the Great Breach opened, on the 12th of May, the Ottoman army made another attempt. But they had to retreat without any result. The war was going on not only on earth, but also underground. Ottoman sappers were working non-stop to collapse Byzantine walls and dig secret tunnels towards the city. As a matter of fact, on the morning of May the 16th, the Byzantine guards heard suspicious sounds coming from the underground, caused the Ottoman sappers to be noticed. Until May the 25th, there were struggles between the Ottoman sappers and the Byzantine forces, which caused great losses. The Byzantine forces defended by blowing up the tunnels at the beginning. However, after a while, they had to close the tunnels with stones as the tunnels reached under the walls. The Ottoman navy in the Golden Horn, the famine in the city, the Ottoman advance underground, and the non-stop artillery had already worn out the city. Sultan Mehmed and his commanders gathered in the camp on the 27th of May and decided to make the final attack on the 29th of May. On the morning of May the 29th, the army was divided into three forces for the final attack. The first group consisted of elders and Christians. The second group consisted of Muslim peasants and garrison soldiers. The last group consisted of the most elite force of the Ottoman Empire, Janissaries. Most of the army was in front of St. Romano's Gate. The first group attacked accompanied by the Ottoman military band. The purpose of this group was to put a ladder on the walls. They attacked for 2 hours. After 2 hours, most of the group was destroyed. Next up was the second group. The attack of the second group was stopped by rains of hot oil, rejuva, and arrows. After 1.5 hours of the attack, the second group was also defeated. Mehmed was approaching the walls with his last group, the Janissaries. He ordered the firing of the largest Ottoman cannon to the walls. This shot, which shocked the Byzantine soldiers, caused the Janissaries to quickly capture the first wall. The morale of the Byzantine soldiers had plummeted. The only obstacle between Constantinople and the Ottoman Empire army was the second wall. Janissary troops approaching the second wall encountered a tough defense. However, with Justiniani wounded and retreating, the morale of the Byzantine troops dropped. Meanwhile, news came from the south. Salimbria Gate had fallen, and Ottoman troops had already begun to plunder the city. Ultimately, the central defense units were surrounded on all sides and surrendered. The towers that tried to resist in the city were defeated one by one within hours. Byzantine Emperor died on the battlefield, and Justiniani soon died of his injuries. Galata region surrendered to the troops of Zaganos Pasha. Thus, all the lands connected to Constantinople were conquered. Sultan Mehmed entered through the St. Romano's Gate. He gave the guarantee of the health of the people of the city and stated that Christians and Jews could stay in the city. Sultan Mehmed was called with a conqueror title. He saw himself as the Roman emperor and his empire as the heir to the Roman Empire. After the conquest of Mehmed the Conqueror, no other flag ever waved again in this city except the Turk's flag. For more videos, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell button.